Hello, welcome to AdRoll Live. Hopefully we are going out on Facebook and on LinkedIn at the moment for our live stream. We're here every Wednesday at 10:30 a.m. Pacific time to bring you various chat connected to direct-to-consumer marketing. And today is no different. Wherever you're watching from, just shoot us a message. You can get in touch via the comments, whether you're watching on Facebook or LinkedIn. We'd love to have your questions throughout our conversation today. Just let us know where you're watching from. Today's theme is all kind of about travel and tourism, which is at a time like this, the past few months of 2020 has been, I'm sure, a completely crazy ride for the travel and tourism industry. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that today. So if that's your industry, if you're connected to that in whatever business that you do, please let us know any questions and thoughts that you have on everything that's been going on. We're going to be joined by Gina, who's from Pegasus, and they offer a whole variety of support. So she's the Associate Director of Digital Marketing. If we bring up a picture here, there we go. And so she builds and streamlines the internal processes for a 100% remote global team of digital marketers, managers, and associates. In her previous roles, she ran operations of PPC, paid social, display, and meta search efforts for independent hotels, primarily in the New York City area. So she has a whole wealth of experience and knowledge that she's going to be sharing with us today. We'll get her introduced in just a moment, but I did want to promote that we have a webinar coming up tomorrow, Thursday, June 18th at 11 a.m. Pacific time. That's 2 p.m. Eastern time. And this is best video practices, secrets to ideation, production, and distribution. So I'm going to be sharing the link for this in the chat. So if you want to sign up and you've got some time tomorrow to watch the webinar, if you can't watch live, don't worry, you can always watch back because you'll get a copy of it in your email, but it's going to be great. Not everyone is familiar with how to create good video content, of course, and the specifics around the distribution. So we have our very own Jesse Vaughan, who's our head of creative at AdRoll, who's going to be taking part and giving his advice. But we also have Chloe Romero, who's the brand marketing strategist at Lemonlight, an on-demand video production company. And I know that we work with them before, and we work with them pretty closely on providing amazing things like this. So there's going to be a ton of stuff you can learn all about. 85% of US internet users watched online video content monthly on devices. So a huge amount. Also, 88% of video marketers are satisfied with the return on investment of their video marketing effort. So throughout the webinar tomorrow, they'll be taking a look at the resources. You don't need a huge team to make good content, how to develop a robust pre-production plan and strategy that aligns with everything for your customer's journey. And then, of course, some tips and tricks to streamline your internal production process. There's going to be a ton of great information for you to take part in and to watch tomorrow. So I'll share that link just briefly. I also should acknowledge the fact that I look like this is a sponsorship for U-Haul going on in the background. If you watch frequently and if you tune in every week, this is not normally what you see. I'm in the process of moving. Today we have hopefully we have somebody coming for our final signature on a document to be a first-time house owner. So this is all a new experience for me. It's very exciting, also incredibly scary. Moving during a pandemic and buying a house during a pandemic feels like one of the most interesting decisions to have made. But yeah, so this isn't like a background, like a snap filter background going on. This is my reality. Welcome to packing hell. Anyway, so I'll just like to say hi to Anita, who is saying hi on our chat on Facebook. Good morning or good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're watching from, Anita. Thank you so much for giving us a shout there on the chat to let us know that you're watching. As I said before, you can always get in touch and you can get your questions to us throughout the chat today. All right, so on with today's guest. Pegasus combines technology with support to bring hotels more control for their reservations, for e-commerce, and their global sales. It's all about. Before we get Gina here to chat, let's show a short video from Pegasus.
In today's distribution landscape, it's getting harder and harder for our hoteliers to connect to their guests directly. There are many barriers out there. You have the OTAs, they are the middlemen, they take a large cut. On the other hand, you have the legacy reservation systems with either very outdated technology or very poor customer service. Every day there seem to be new obstacles for our hoteliers. It's really hard for them to keep up with all the changes going on and at the same time keep your guests happy.
Pegasus is here to break down those barriers. We're going to give you more control over the guest relationship than ever before. So whether you're a boutique hotel or a casino, a regional group, or a big brand, you'll have the tools to maximize your revenue and take more reservations.
With Pegasus, we expand your global reach with hundreds of distribution channels, corporate and consortia sales and service, and a high-performance direct booking platform. We are constantly introducing new solutions that help our customers better connect with their guests, winning more direct business and winning more RFPs.
All right, that was a bit of a shortened version of one of the videos for Pegasus there, but gave a good bit of insight into what they do. And I want to just welcome here to our live stream, Gina. Good morning.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon for me, I think. I don't even know what time it is.
I was going to ask, whereabouts are you based?
I'm in Pittsburgh, so Western Pennsylvania on East Coast time. Yeah, it's a nice little place to be. And considering, and you kind of teed this up a little earlier, but our entire team is remote, and I guess most companies are nowadays anyway, given COVID's kind of decimation to the office space life. But most of our folks are all on the East Coast. So
awesome. So I mean, you've been working remote. As I'd said there in your intro, you've been working with teams that are remote. So obviously, this transition has not been particularly difficult for you guys.
Fortunately, yes. Yeah, I think we've all, so I've been with Pegasus for the last 3 years. I started whenever we were first travel trippers, so pre-merger, and I've been working remotely for the last 3 years. So I think those of us who have been in the remote space kind of know the little tips and tricks that everyone else kind of jumped in on now that remote work is really what everyone needs to do in order to stay safe, right?
Is that kind of common for for a travel industry? Do you feel like a lot of it is remote just because of the nature of it being international, or is that specific to the company?
You would think that there would be more organizations that are similar to us that have a larger remote footprint. But in terms of other companies that are like us, I would say the fully remote and fully distributed remote team is a little bit abnormal. So definitely more specific to the organization. So it was something that was important for Travel Tripper in particular. Pegasus also had some, different offices and things like that, remote distribution. But for Travel Tripper in particular, talent is really the most paramount thing, being able to bring in people who have all the skills, right? And whenever you're focused on a given pool, makes it a lot harder to be able to find the best talent. So that's where the remote aspect comes into play.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely talk a little bit more. I mean, you mentioned the Travel Tripper and Pegasus. We'll talk about that merge in just a moment, but I was hoping just to dig in a little bit more about yourself and your background, and tell us a little bit about the position that you're in and how you've kind of come up to this moment.
Sure. So I think your intro was perfect, but just a little bit more on that. So my name is Gina Ciarrocchi Zech, in case everyone was wondering how you pronounce that big behemoth of a last name. But as the Associate Director of Digital Marketing, really where my concentrations are, I'm focused on every aspect of campaign building and our overall marketing mix for our hotel clients from an operational perspective. So really where I thrive is thinking about how and why we do the things that we do, why we choose the specific campaigns we do, and ultimately how to build them out in the most efficient way. That's where the streamlining different processes and coming up with different processes comes in. Thinking about what campaigns are good levers to pull at which time and how to integrate them, that kind of thing. I started with Pegasus, like I said, about 3 years ago, pre-merger, which I'll give a little bit more detail about shortly. But I started as a digital marketing manager, so being a little bit more in the weeds than what I'm in currently. And I focused primarily with independent properties in New York City. So what COVID has really helped for me has really broadened my knowledge of different markets and really how the hospitality space is changing because of this virus and how each individual market is definitely different and impacted differently. So
awesome.
Yeah.
And then, so Pegasus as a company, can you tell us a little bit about the history, kind of the origin and some of the services that Pegasus provides?
So Pegasus as a whole is a hospitality tech company. That's going to be the easiest and simplistic way to shape it. As you kind of teed up, Laura, we have a reservations platform. We have a really strong focus on global sales and our global distribution system. E-commerce, which is where my role sits, and then also our intelligence group with our Power BI reporting platform and other different data and analytics support for hoteliers. So Travel Tripper and Pegasus were both hospitality tech platforms or hospitality tech organizations prior to the merger. And that's really the common denominator between the two. So ultimately, that common denominator led to the merger and really allowed us to be able to cherry pick whose products we want to continue to push forward and create the best, most well-packaged solution for the hoteliers that we work with. So whereas our organization as a whole is focused on maximizing a hotelier's distribution strategy and ultimately making their lives a little easier, for me and the e-commerce team, our whole goal is to drive direct business. So direct business meaning users who actually go to the hotel's website and book directly with them, as opposed to booking through an OTA or an online travel agent like Expedia or Booking.com. The whole goal with that is that ultimately direct bookings are more efficient for hotels. They're more cost efficient, ultimately drive a higher return. There's a high likelihood that the user would potentially come back and continue to book direct provided that experience is solid for them. So that's really what our e-commerce division focuses on, is being able to drive that direct business and helping the hotel win direct.
And so both companies were pretty major, competitors and drivers in the industry as well. So combined with DataTripper and Pegasus, when you guys merged, it's kind of like bringing two huge companies together. Like
pretty much, yeah. And Pegasus was around for about a little bit over a decade, I would say, longer than Travel Tripper. Pegasus also had a larger footprint internationally. So Travel Tripper was known internationally, but in terms of our primary portfolio, a lot of it was domestic. So combining the two, combining the innovation between the companies, combining the customer service, those are really all the ways that we've been able to kind of expand and expand our overall capabilities.
I love that, kind of just for a nostalgic throwback. I think like 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, the idea of just, obviously online for travel, it's like, I can't imagine now really going to a travel agent like you used to do, and book your flight and sit there and have all the brochures and all this. It's amazing.
And people still do, which is wild. Like people still do it. That's why our global distribution system is such a strong product. And I think also one of the things that I've learned just having worked in hospitality, and I'm sure other hospitality digital marketers could say this too, that you really get a feel for what is cultural in terms of how we book. Internationally, direct booking is very hard to win at. Generally speaking, different international markets aren't so focused on direct versus domestically. I don't know if you have heard or seen the Hilton campaign about driving direct business. Anna Kendrick was in it. It was a whole big thing. It was the first organization that really put, marketing dollars behind saying all right, people, you got to book direct. This is the best thing that you can do for you and ultimately for the hotel. So that's definitely more of a domestic kind of sentiment.
Awesome. For yourself throughout your career, you must have seen such a huge, just a change. Not just obviously within having this recent, merge with the company, but also just as a journey of marketing, it must be completely different from when you first started.
For sure, because whenever prior to joining Pegasus about 3 years ago, my first experience with working with hospitality was at another advertising agency where I was solely focused on paid search. That's where my background is all paid search focused. And at that point, meta search advertising wasn't really something that anyone was playing in the space of, except for very large CRS players like Sabre and those kinds of organizations. I think they were just starting to dig into meta search a little bit, but it wasn't really something that especially independent hotels even had the capability to do. Now, meta search is such an important part of the overall marketing mix for our hotels. And is also one of the channels that we're really recommending that hotels get started back on, especially coming out of COVID. It's a lowest hanging fruit kind of channel, so it makes sense to get right back in the space with that.
As you mentioned there with COVID, obviously this year, 2020 has just been an exception to any rule that we have. Everything has been completely somewhat out the blue. And can you talk us a little bit through what we've seen this year for the travel industry and for hotels in 2020?
It's been intense. I think you talk to any hotelier, in particular, people who are working in the hotels, and they would say probably more explicit terms than me. But yeah, it's been really intense. And in particular markets, it makes me think of moving into 2020 for New York City. We knew that 2020 was going to be a tough pull with a lot of supply and kind of waiting demand. Leaving 2019 into 2020, we had a feeling that it was going to be hard, you know. But for the first part of Q1, kind of weathering into that, especially in that market. But then come mid-February, early March, that's whenever we started to see everything basically nosedive. So for organizations like us and for our organization, from a marketing perspective, we saw marketing budgets really just dry up. We got into conversations with hotels about, look, like we're not seeing any revenue coming in. We're not even able to pay our mortgages or our taxes, so let alone marketing budgets. So it was definitely like a survival mode or survival mechanism kicked in. And that's what really ceased all kinds of marketing operations. So that's why now is a good conversation to have about travel, because we're seeing so many markets start to open up, like Florida, any other destination kind of market. We've seen a lot of properties even have really high rates of occupancy, especially over the weekends. We're talking with one client that we have in Sedona that almost, I think they were 2 percentage points shy of 100% occupancy over a weekend. So there's definitely a comeback coming as of right now, but it really hinges on guest sentiment and really feeling comfortable with getting back out there and knowing that they're safe and protected, and ultimately that we're not going to have a surge of COVID round 2.
And I guess from for hotels and from also the customer expectation, like the new luxury might not be so much like what luxury's been before. It's going to be about having, contactless experiences, perhaps, like being able to self-manage your stay more. And then obviously, as you say, just in terms of like hygiene, safety, making sure that that everything's kind of being consistently cleaned and stuff like that is going to be a massive part of confidence.
Right. Yeah. And I think the other aspect of that too is being able to offer flexible cancellation policies wherever possible. Ultimately, what we've been talking with clients about is that we understand that discounting is really what makes people want to book something, right? Especially if rate is the last question in their mind. A lot of people say, okay, what's the best deal that I can get? But we have to be realistic from a dollars and cents perspective, that not every hotel is in a position to be able to heavily discount, nor should they. So really where a lot of the flexibility can lie is what kind of cancellation policy can you offer, just in the event that something does happen with somebody, what level of consideration can you give to them?
I guess also once hotels potentially have, if somebody pays for a stay, and even if they can extend and change the date, if that money is already kind of in the bank for the hotel, at least it can still, kind of extend the possibilities for operations.
Right.
And I assume that a lot of experiences like spa experiences, restaurant dining is all kind of going to be somewhat at a limited capacity as well.
Yeah, and it all really depends on what the legal requirements of a market are. We've definitely seen way more flexibility in the southern states, like the destinations I mentioned, and then a lot more precautions being taken in some other areas. So it's truly dependent on what the local government is thinking, and really how they want to best protect, or in some cases not protect, their people, right? So I think one of the biggest things for hotels to be able to make sure that they do is over communicate, honestly. If your restaurant's closed, you got to tell people your restaurant's closed, so they don't pull up and wonder, okay, well, now what am I supposed to do?
And I think, moving into communication then, obviously, as you mentioned earlier in the year, it was kind of that, in terms of marketing budgets, everything kind of just stopped. And I think that really was across the board for a lot of companies, a lot of industries. People are just reviewing. They took the time to go, what do we, what's important? What do we need to do? What's the best way forward? What are some of the tactics, though, for marketing that hotels and resorts have done to try and encourage still, building a connection with their community and with their customer?
From a paid media perspective, our biggest recommendation for hotels that are getting back into the space is that we need to concentrate on the lowest hanging fruit. So for folks who, and to expand on that, I guess it's less about finding new guests and less about prospecting and brand awareness as it is about concentrating on the guests that actually know your brand and know who you are and are actually searching for you. So brand paid search is really the biggest tick box to check, I guess, that we're trying to get properties started back on with. And then outside of that, meta search is really the next biggest thing, because at that point, an ad will not show unless you have availability for the dates that the user is shopping, and then from there, right, it just becomes a much more lowest hanging fruit kind of effort, like I said. So those are the two big things to concentrate on, given that everything right now is really hyper ROI focused in terms of marketing. We're always hyper ROI focused, but I think now so it's even more imperative that the dollars actually stretch and that they're going to the right places. So for our smaller properties, our smaller independent hotels, those are like the two main efforts that we're really trying to capitalize on. For larger hotels, possibly hotels that are in more populous markets, then that's whenever we can start to incorporate our display remarketing and other efforts that are a little bit more mid-funnel. And we have more space to be able to bring those folks back, concentrate on them, and then push them down into the funnel, convert them.
And I guess we're at the moment working in pretty short-term goals or short-term views. We're in now June. Yes, June.
I have to remind myself of what month it is too. That's fine.
I know it's scary, right? It's like, oh my God, half the year's gone. But often for hotels and for travel, it works in seasonality, and I guess that's kind of a little bit out the window at the moment and not necessarily a priority. But my assumption is, first of all, we're working domestically, and then perhaps like international travel will be the next stage for hotels to be thinking about.
Absolutely. And like I said, a lot of it is dependent on when borders start to open, when mandatory quarantines end. Hawaii just opened for inter-island travel this week. But everything else outside of that is really restricted. So we have areas like that where the whole, I don't want to say staycation, but for lack of a better word, staycation kind of model really is what's the only possibility, right? For other areas that tend to have a high drive market or have people coming locally, those are the hotels that we're seeing that bounce back the quickest. For hotels that are really driven by international traffic, so you have geos like New York City or Miami that are really like gateways internationally, those are the ones that we're seeing that are kind of on the fence about whether they want to come back and really support all of their marketing pushes like they were previously. In terms of seasonality, though, I think there's going to be some aspects of seasonality that still suit. Like we still know that in New York City in Q1, it's a bloodbath. I don't think that that's really going to change. I think all of those harsher aspects of seasonality where we know where the troughs are as opposed to the high points, I think a lot of those troughs are still going to stay around. So now for a lot of us, it's just about figuring out, okay, how can we communicate and assure guests and improve that overall guest sentiment so we can make those troughs a little bit less troughy, for lack of a better way to put it.
and what about some of that, for messaging and for that kind of, for that engagement with customers? What are some of the good examples you've seen? I mean, I'd seen like Hilton shared like a recipe. They did like, this was probably early stages, and it was kind of like, everyone's been baking like crazy throughout quarantine and stuff. And they kind of maximize a little bit on some of that social, the chefs doing a recipe, people could like kind of watch it. And there's been various ways to try and entice or, just to stay connected with customers. What are some of the great examples you've seen of that? Or, what would you recommend of those, for ways to engage with customers?
In terms of keeping your brand in the forefront, I think a lot of the bigger brands are doing that, like you said, with Hilton. The other one that comes to mind with me is the bartending videos that I've seen pop up on Instagram coming from Kimpton. A lot of the bartenders in their restaurants were doing little like at-home quick like cocktail recipes. There's a mint julep one. I forget what the bartender was from, but he was fantastic. I learned that you have to slap the mint against your hand as opposed to crinkling it up or muddling it. So there's a little fun fact for you. But outside of that, in terms of actually making changes that or distributing messages that help guests actually book as opposed to keeping the brand in the forefront, that goes back to the over communication thing that I briefly mentioned a little earlier. Emails, any kind of other direct push notifications to people. Those are really going to be the most important kinds of messages to put out there. Things that tell users, okay, your restaurant's closed, your spa's closed, your restaurant's reopening, your spa's reopening, and here are the precautions that we're taking. And also that those precautions are actually being followed. I've noticed in a couple of different restaurants, not hotels, but instances where they're communicating what their precautions are, but then they're not necessarily following through with those. So the follow through is just as important as the actual communication. Outside of email, we're also reflecting the same kind of messaging in paid search to the degree that we're able to. So messaging about cancellation policies and overall booking with confidence. Those are a lot of the messages that we're trying to at least put in front of guests to make them curious about, okay, what are the precautions that they're taking and do I feel comfortable with these?
Well, I definitely think I could speak for many people when I say that when we're able to actually travel with especially with complete confidence, the travel industry is going to have a massive boom when everybody 100% feels confident with traveling again. I mean, just the idea of going on a staycation or a break right now, or for myself visiting England to see my family,
it's daunting.
You just think, like, when will I next be able to do that? So I could definitely see that, at least as things get opened and tested and, and we figure out what kind of works and perhaps what doesn't, that there'll be that, confidence and that people will start traveling more again.
Right. That's the thing about travel, is that it hinges so much on the economy and on sentiment, because if the economy is in a problematic place, then a lot of times people don't have the funds to be able to go places. And with the restrictions that we have now, a lot of the places that you were able to go are very limited. So generally speaking, that's something that anyone in the hospitality space needs to be attentive to, is that if sentiment doesn't improve, if people don't feel comfortable, and if they don't have the funds to be able to, then that's something that we have to be sensitive and be aware of.
Well, just before we wrap up today, I want to end on a positive note, because obviously I know it's like, so you've been dealing with a lot of challenges, but it also, I think, obviously from challenges come a lot of really interesting insights and hopefully positive changes. So, what do you feel could be the positives of like everything that's been learned over 2020 for the travel industry?
My immediate response to that makes me think of e-commerce for travel in particular, as opposed to the entirety of the travel space. But for e-commerce, I think this time has really allowed us to simplify a lot of what we're doing. Ultimately, innovation is in Pegasus's blood and also in the hospitality space. There's definitely no mistake why the company exists in the way that it does, because ultimately innovation is such a big part of what we do and what we want to provide. And with that innovation, there's a balance with efforts that we know are tried and true and tested and are going to be revenue generating tactics for us. So it's kind of reaffirmed a lot of what we knew in terms of the efforts that work and the messaging that works. What it's given us an opportunity to do is to be able to expand on that and see if there's anything different, But outside of that, as far as like how all of this will impact the travel space and what the industry will look like, it'll definitely remain to be seen. I think maybe what this will, going back to what we said about staycations and things like that, it'll help people be able to see how they can broaden their own horizons even in a closer space without necessarily having to go very far. Whether that benefits the travel industry or not, that'll also remain to be seen. But at least from like a personal perspective, that'll help people kind of get a feel for how they can explore within their own, space.
Absolutely. I could see, I know in the UK, we've been through years of very cheap flights. And so going to Europe has always just been like such an accessible option. If you can get a £50 flight to Rome or something from, so it'd be interesting to see if with everybody being, at home and exploring, like you say, their own back garden, like finding the beauty, charm, and options within staying in the country. Hopefully weather permitting, obviously, is always a big thing for England, and what we're obsessed with.
In Pittsburgh too, same thing.
Yeah, so sometimes you just need that sunshine, but it's definitely an opportunity to kind of expand in ways and to see new horizons that maybe you just wouldn't have ever had the opportunity to test. And to see without
exactly. And it could give us a lot of opportunity to be able to look at our own infrastructure in the States and see how we can better support people to be able to get where they need to go.
Well, I'm wishing we had more trains here.
That's where I'm headed. They're talking about a hyperloop coming out of Chicago that would also come through Pittsburgh. So maybe that's a development that would be firmed up a little bit as a result of all this. Who knows?
That would be amazing. I did Amtrak up to Portland from San Francisco, from Oakland, and that took 18 hours. It was an amazing experience. It was really charming. You have a cabin and they made it into beds and stuff. So it was a really nice experience. But for 18 hours versus maybe an hour flight, an hour and a half or something, you do go, this is a different offering. It's a completely different travel experience. Where
definitely
connected hyperloops and fast trains would be an amazing way to see the entirety of the country, hopefully, because there's a lot to be seen.
Very true.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And before we let you go, I just want to make sure that everybody knows where they can find information and where they can, kind of get in touch if they want to. So what are the best places?
Sure. So the best places are our website, pegs.com. All the other contact info in terms of sales opportunities or getting in touch with our marketing team, with our e-commerce team, etc. All of that will be on that website. We're also on LinkedIn, all the social media channels under Pegasus.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat today and sharing your expertise. It's super interesting. And best of luck for everything moving forward for the rest of the year.
Great. Thanks so much, Laura.
There we go. That's Gina. If you want to check that information out, it's pegs.com. So you can find all of the kind of like service options and solutions that they offer. And of course, just read up on, they've got some great resources, as you'll see there at that top tab. I was taking a look at some of their webinars. They do chats. They have kind of like coffee hangouts and things like that to discuss various travel industry, challenges and to get together and discuss various topics. So do check out their resources. They also have an ebook coming up, Gina had said, that's going to be coming up soon, which is all about reopening details, considerations for major angles and for reservations for e-commerce and global sales. So when that ebook comes out, we'll try and get some information onto our social so that you can check that out as well and get involved. Okay, before we go today, I just want to once again say we have our webinar that's happening tomorrow morning, and that's going to be at, did I say morning? Is it morning? Let me check. Well, morning for Pacific time, and it's going to be at 2 p.m. Eastern time. So this is tomorrow, June 18th, 11 a.m. If you go to adroll.com, you can sign up there. I'm also going to share the link once we disconnect from the live stream into the chat. So if you want to check out best video practices, secrets, loads of great content, loads of great information and some actionable items for how you can make amazing video content. So make sure you're checking that out today. Okay, thanks so much for watching. We're going to be back again next week at the same time, 10:30 a.m. Pacific time. But whatever you're doing, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you soon.